Welcome to Field Notes. I'm Jennifer Bearden with the University of Florida IFAS Extension in Okaloosa County. And today I'm doing something a little different. We're going to do a longer podcast and talk about issues facing agriculture, but I'm doing it with a local farmer. So Shannon Nixon is the local farmer. I'm going to let him tell a little bit about himself, what he farms, and how long he's been farming.
Well, I was thinking you knew all about me, so you could introduce me. But like she said, my name is Shannon Nixon, Baker, Florida. I've been a lifelong resident, been out here kicking dust all of my life and trying to make this farming work. And, we grow peanuts, soybeans, wheat, and have the corn maze in Baker, and just super excited to be able to sit next to a super educated lady to help straighten me out.
I don't know about that. Sometimes I sound like cornbread. But on that, you grow peanuts and soybeans and a little bit of wheat and things like that now, but you've grown other things, so other ventures too. So you've kind of dabbled in a lot of farming, and so have a pretty good knowledge of all the issues that face farmers today. So let's just kind of, if you give a kind of an overview of a lot of the issues, and then we'll pick three to delve into. So,
well, there is a plethora of problems facing farmers today, and I know people get tired of hearing farmers pour mouth, and I do. And we've done it for so long. We've went around, oh, it's terrible, and obviously we've made some money, or we wouldn't be here. But now, if I had to narrow it down to three things, I would say the land use problem we have in Okaloosa County, the runaway production costs and low commodities, and right now the drought. The drought's become a serious concern for producers in Northwest Florida and all across the Deep South. So I would say those are probably the top three right now.
I mean, we have other, insurance issues or deer damage, things like that. We have other issues, and I think the farmers are continually fighting nature just to make a crop. So that's going to innately have some problems. But let's delve into that first problem. And I know you said it was just, or said Okaloosa County, but farmers are competing with developers across the country right now for land. And that leads to increased land prices, which makes it basically impossible for farmers to compete. So can you talk about that and how that's affecting farming?
Well, I think it's safe to say that there's nowhere in the United States that you could go buy a workable size farm, pay the current price for it, and ever make it farming. And people don't realize that we're competing against developers. Developers can pay many times over what a farmer could pay. I've ran some numbers last year and just threw out like $2,500 an acre. If you bought a 1,000-acre farm and paid $2,500 an acre for it, you got $2.5 million. Even with a right down payment, you'd never be able to service that debt as a row crop farmer. I'm not saying there's not a commodity out there that wouldn't do it, but not the crops that we're growing.
Mm-hmm. So, we're seeing that here, definitely. So we're seeing land being used for houses, and that land either is in farm production or has been in farm production, or the soil there makes it better, so it's prime farmland soils that are better suited for ag production than other soils. And so it's kind of a natural resource issue, not just a land use issue, but we're using up a natural resource in a way that we can't ever get it back.
Absolutely. I think that what we've allowed people to do, and it's the industry's fault. I take it personal. We've allowed people to become detached from the realities of food production, and the farmland is the factory floor. There's not another machine somewhere. Publix, up the road doesn't have a green bean machine. it takes farm real estate to pump out that food, and I think we're way behind on this. I think this is something that's going to have a government solution, because outside money is going to wind up buying up all the farmland, because there's no money inside of farming to buy the farmland unless it's already owned.
Yeah. So that is one of the things that's restricting young farmers and ranchers from actually getting into farming. But another thing that's difficult, makes it difficult, is the rising input costs. So rising equipment costs, rising fertilizer costs, and you couple that with low commodity prices, it makes it really difficult to pencil out for a new person to just kind of jump into farming.
Well, actually, it's hard to pencil out for someone that's established, that's got some, equity in equipment. But it's almost an impossibility right now for a young producer, even if he could rent the land and rent it at a fair price, to go buy a tractor. I'm just going to throw a number out here. 150 horse tractor, PTO horsepower tractor, is probably $250,000, and that price is more than doubled in the last 20 years. And it just, I weigh everything out in corn dollars, because corn is the number one commodity grown in the United States. Even though we may not grow it around here, that's not our typical crop. We still need corn to be the commodity price to be high to help us. It brings other commodity prices up. But it takes a lot more corn now, bushels of corn, to pay for a tractor than it did just a few years ago. So if we tie everything back, and I know that sounds confusing, but someone as smart as you, later on, you could probably clean that up, and where people can understand how this ties back to the cost of production.
Yeah. So the corn isn't the huge commodity here, but that is the commodity that kind of sets the prices of everything worldwide. Really, corn production is hugely important, along with our soybean acreage, which once again is not a huge. I know you grow it, but it's not a huge commodity here. But those two kind of set the stage worldwide for pricing everywhere else. And so we've got all this rising input cost, we've got our low commodities, and then if that wasn't bad enough, then you get hit with something like the drought that's happening now. So now we've got all this historic drought. So drought's measured from D1 being a little to D4 being extreme. And we're at a D2. That was the last data I saw. I would not be surprised if we get bumped into D3. But right now, most of our county is in D2. So we're, and definitely the production area in our county is D2. So that's a pretty significant drought. And this is planting time right now. We should be, in fact, you shouldn't even be here. You should be out in the field planting right now.
Absolutely.
Got to record the podcast with you because it's so dry, but that's not helping get the peanuts in the ground, though. So talk to us about a drought and how farmers face that kind of thing.
Well, as you know, I'm an old man. I didn't really want to admit that, but got a lot of experience farming. And
you're experienced.
I'm experienced.
Farmer,
okay,
experienced
I'm seasoned. Maybe
seasoned.
That's what it is. In all of my seasons, I've never, in my farming career, went into a spring this dry. Never. Usually, we're wanting it kind of dry up, and we can start getting some crops planted. The end of April, 1st of May. We try to beat that when that dry season is coming in, because May is typically a dry month. And what is concerning, if you got good subsoil moisture, which we do not have any, then you can get a half-inch rain and you can plant and you can get a crop up. A half-inch rain is not going to get crops up, probably even a 1-inch rain. I don't know what it's going to take. Some things we have to leave to people above us, and this is one of those instances that it's going to get really interesting. And what I've always found is one extreme follows another. So in farming, it could be too dry this week, and the next month it's too wet to get in the field. So that's why our agricultural footprint has to be protected at all levels, and because there's not always going to be an excess. And I think American consumer has been spoiled that there's always going to be food on that shelf, and there are mitigating circumstances that are arising before us that we have never dealt with before. You talked about this, the production costs. This fuel situation's hurting us, and I don't want to get into the politics of that, but fuel, off-road fuel went from like $3.25 to now it's $5.50. Sometimes even the tax-free fuel is more expensive than what's at the pump. So go figure on that. But
and I saw a graphic just the other day that showed the fertilizer cost, how much it's gone up, 20, 30, 40% increase in fertilizer prices just in the past few weeks. And we were kind of expecting a better year fertilizer price-wise than what we've seen. But that's not going to be the case now, because now is the time that people are going to be purchasing that, and the prices are pretty high. Now on the drought, farmers, there are safety net programs, and we could spend an entire podcast just on safety net programs and how they work. But there are safety net programs, but those safety net programs don't make up everything that you would have made. They just kind of keep you afloat for this year.
Well, let me put a safety net program. There is federal crop insurance that you're probably referring to, and if federal crop insurance was, if we put this the same as your house, a farmer can insure. Typically, we go with 75% of our actual production histories, which we're leaving 25. If you have an insurance claim, you're not going to make money. You're mitigating the losses because you got some serious money, and usually it's not our money, it's the banker's money, and they require that safety net program. And obviously not everyone follows the rules. There's a lot of crop insurance fraud that I'm sure we can talk about later, because I think the public needs to understand that just because it's abused doesn't mean it should be done away with, because it actually serves the consumer probably as much or more than it does the farmer. And maybe we can clean that up and tell that story.
That's kind of why it came into being is because of that it protects our food supply, and our food supply, that's national security. Wars have been lost and won based on who can control that food supply in and out, and so food is a national security.
Well, and if we can articulate that concept to the public, because listen, there's not enough farmers to change the dynamics of agriculture. We're a very low percentage of the population. I've heard 2%, but I can tell you it's not even 2% of Okaloosa.
I really think it's more 2% are involved in farming, not necessarily 2%. There's people like me that saw that going into farming was too risky, and instead of farming like my family had, I went and got a degree so I could help farmers. Now I'm in the ag industry, so I'm counted in that 2%, but I'm not a farmer per se. So my skin, I don't have as much skin in the game as what you do, of course.
Well, and you got a lot of work to do if you're gonna help farmers, because this is a time. But a lot of people, they look at a farmer and they say poor farmer. They never look at it and say poor consumer. The consumer. Look at what happened after COVID. Mm-hmm. The prices of the commodities didn't go up, but the food prices sure did. Somebody's making a lot more money, and what I think people need more than any time in the history of modern, media and all this, they need someone that they can trust when they're telling them something. And I don't know how many of these we're going to do. You may fire me after today, and that's fine too, because I got a lot of work to do. But people need to know the true story of agriculture. And I think that's harder to find, because people will protect that dollar. And, I'm not saying that's all wrong, but people need to understand that some of the narratives that they're getting off of social media, they're just wrong.
Yeah.
And hopefully we can dispel those, and we can talk about some of the uncomfortable things.
Yeah. So maybe we can talk a little about crop insurance and those safety net programs. Talk about other things that are affecting farmers. We didn't even talk about, deer damage and how the wildlife wildlife in general. You had bears eating your peanuts last season. So we can talk about all sorts of things like that. We can get into the uncomfortable talks about some of the crop protectants or chemicals that we use. I know for me, in my doctorate program, I spend a lot of time studying that sort of thing. And I know in my shorter podcasts that I do that go on the radio, I do a lot of that, talking about crop protectants and things like that face farming. So hopefully this will be the first of many that I get to do, and maybe even get a couple of other farmers to talk about it, because I think maybe hearing it from a couple of farmers would help, because want to make sure that the consumers understand what really happens in farming.
Well, one thing, if I could, if I had a magic wand that I could articulate anything to someone and them receive it, would for the average consumer to realize how much they have invested in farming, and how what happens on the farm is going to affect them.
That is true.
And if they don't step up to the plate, we're going to lose farming in America. And in a way, will we wake up one day and there won't be any farming? No. But what we're going to do is we're going to destroy the mechanism to a point that it becomes unaffordable. And we're dependent upon foreign countries. And there's a lot of things we can talk about going forward, like our dependence on crop protectants that are manufactured in other countries. We're in a very precarious situation, and I'm not trying to overhype this, because there's some things I'm really concerned about. That's why I'm here today talking to you.
That's right. Well, hopefully we'll have many more. Thank y'all for joining us for today, and we'll talk to y'all next time.